The day Julian Pembroke, the Duke of Kingsmere, cast his wife aside, the sky above London wept. Rain slashed against the windows of their townhouse like tiny fists demanding entry, but inside, all was still. The servants had been dismissed to the lower floors. The clocks had been stopped. Even the fire in the marble hearth seemed to hold its breath as Arabella Whitmore stood in the center of the drawing room, her hands folded before her, her spine straight as a blade, facing the man she had married exactly 11 months before. Julian stood near the window, his silhouette dark against the grey stormlight. He had not looked at her since he entered the room. In his hand, he held a letter, creases worn soft from being opened and closed too many times. The paper trembled slightly, though whether from rage or something else, Arabella could not tell. She had stopped being able to read him weeks ago, perhaps months. The husband who had once looked at her with warmth in his grey eyes, now regarded her as a stranger, and worse, as a deceiver. "I have given this matter considerable thought." His voice was low, controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to command. "I have consulted my solicitor. The settlement has been prepared. You will find it more than generous, given the circumstances." Arabella's hands tightened against each other. She had known this was coming from the moment he had summoned her. She had seen it in the rigid set of his shoulders, in the way the servants avoided her eyes that morning, in the heavy silence that had descended upon the house like a funeral shroud. But knowing did not make the blow softer. It only made the anticipation more cruel. "Might I know the grounds upon which you seek to divorce me?" Her voice emerged steady, though her heart was shattering. "I have committed no adultery. I have not abandoned our home. I have done nothing to bring shame upon your name." At that, he turned. His face was carved from stone, all sharp angles and hard planes, but his eyes, those beautiful grey eyes that had once held such tenderness, were burning with cold fury. "Nothing?" He held up the letter. "Then explain this." She did not need to see the writing to know what it contained. She had suspected for weeks that someone was working against her, whispering poison into her husband's ear. Now she had proof, though it was far too late for proof to matter. "It is a lie," she said quietly. "Whatever that letter claims, Julian, it is a lie. I have never been unfaithful to you. I have never loved anyone but you." Something flickered in his gaze. Doubt, perhaps, or the ghost of the love they had once shared. But it died as quickly as it had appeared, smothered by whatever poison the letter contained. "The evidence is extensive. Dates, locations, witness accounts. Do you think I wished to believe this? Do you think I wanted to discover that the woman I made my duchess was carrying on an affair with my own cousin?" Arabella's composure cracked. "Edwin?" The name tasted like ash on her tongue. "You believe I have been unfaithful with Edwin?" "I believe the testimony of people who have no reason to lie. I believe the letters exchanged between you, letters I have read with my own eyes. I believe the innkeeper who recognized your description, and the maid who saw you together, and the coachman who drove you to your assignations." His voice rose with each word, the controlled mask slipping to reveal the wounded man beneath. "I believe what is before me, Arabella, and what is before me is proof that my marriage has been a farce." She took a step toward him, her hands reaching out, but he recoiled as though her touch might burn. The gesture cut deeper than any word could have. "Please," she whispered. "Please listen to me. None of it is true. I swear it on my life. Someone has fabricated this evidence. Someone wants you to believe ill of me." "Who? Who would do such a thing?" She opened her mouth, but no name came. Because she did not know. She had suspicions, terrible suspicions that crawled through her mind like serpents, but she had no proof. She had nothing but her word, and her word was clearly no longer enough. Julian watched her silence and nodded slowly, as though she had confirmed everything. "I thought as much." He set the letter down on the table between them, a barrier neither would cross. "The documents will be delivered to you by week's end. You may keep your personal belongings. The settlement includes the house in Bath and an annual income of £4,000. Given the circumstances, I consider myself exceedingly generous." "Given the circumstances," she repeated, and now her voice did tremble. "I would rather have my husband believe me than have all the houses in England." For a long moment, they stood facing each other, and Arabella saw something in his face that gave her hope, a hesitation, a crack in the wall he had built between them. She willed him to see her, to truly see her, to recognize the truth that she had never betrayed him. But then his jaw tightened, and the wall rebuilt itself, stronger than before. The carriage will take you wherever you wish to go. I will remain in London until the matter is settled. I trust you will not make this more difficult than it need be. And with that, Julian Pembroke, the Duke of Kingsmere, walked out of the room and out of her life, leaving Arabella standing alone in the silent drawing room, with nothing but the rain for company, and a secret she had not yet found the courage to speak. A secret that would change everything, if only he had stayed to hear it. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than any gunshot. Arabella stood motionless for a long time, her hands pressed against her stomach, her eyes fixed on the empty doorway. She had planned to tell him that morning. She had rehearsed the words 100 times, imagining the joy that would light his face, the way he would sweep her into his arms, the future they would build together. She was carrying his child. And now he would never know. The journey to Bath took 3 days. Arabella spent most of it staring out the carriage window at the passing countryside, watching the green hills of England roll by like waves on a distant sea. Her lady's maid, Margaret, sat across from her, occasionally offering food that Arabella could not bring herself to eat, or murmuring words of comfort that neither of them believed. Margaret had been with her since childhood, a gift from her mother on her 16th birthday, and she was the only person in the world who knew the full truth. "He will discover his mistake," Margaret said quietly on the second day, as the carriage rumbled through a small village whose name Arabella did not bother to learn. "Men like the Duke, they are proud, but they are not fools. He will investigate further. He will find the truth." Arabella turned from the window, her face pale and drawn. Will he? Or will he bury himself in his work, and his anger, and convince himself that he was right all along? You know Julian. Once he has made a decision, he does not reconsider. He cannot bear to be wrong. Then you must make him reconsider. Write to him. Tell him about the child. No. Arabella's voice was sharp enough to startle them both. She softened, her hand moving unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "If he does not want me, I will not trap him with a child. I will not have him return out of duty. I have seen marriages built on obligation, Margaret. They are prisons. I will not live in one, and I will not raise a child in one. But you are his wife. The child is his heir." "The child is mine," Arabella said fiercely, "and I will protect it from whatever comes, even if what comes is its own father." Margaret fell silent, but her expression remained troubled. She knew, as Arabella did, that a divorced woman with a child would face impossible odds. Society would shun her. The scandal would follow her for the rest of her days, and a child born outside the protection of its father's name, even if that father was a duke, would face a lifetime of whispered cruelties. But Arabella had made her choice. She would endure whatever she must. She had endured worse, after all. She had endured watching her husband's love turn to ice. She had endured the knowledge that someone clever and patient and utterly ruthless, had woven a web of lies around her so complete that even the man who had sworn to cherish her had believed them. She would endure this too. The house in Bath was a modest Georgian townhouse on a quiet crescent, far from the fashionable streets where society's elite paraded each afternoon. It had belonged to Arabella's grandmother, a woman of quiet strength who had taught her to ride and shoot, and never apologize for being clever. The house had been empty since the old woman's death 3 years before, but it was still furnished, still warm with memories, still filled with the scent of lavender and old books. Arabella stepped through the front door and felt something loosen in her chest. Here, at least, she was safe. Here, she could think. The first weeks passed in a haze of exhaustion and morning sickness that lasted well past noon. Arabella spent her days in the small garden behind the house, or reading in the library, or walking the quiet streets of Bath where no one knew her face. She had always been slender, but now her body began to change in subtle ways. A softness at her waist, a new fullness in her face. The child was growing, announcing its presence with each passing day. She did not write to Julian. She did not write to anyone from her former life. She existed in a suspended world, a life between lives, waiting for something she could not name. It was Margaret who finally broke the silence, 4 months after their arrival. She came into the morning room with a newspaper in her trembling hands, her face white as milk. "Your Grace," she whispered, though Arabella had told her 100 times to drop the title. "Your Grace, you must see this." Arabella took the paper with a sense of foreboding that coiled cold in her stomach. The headlines screamed at her from the page, black letters on cheap paper, the kind of lurid typeface reserved for the worst scandals. Duke of Kingsmere to wed again, society beauty, Lady Catherine Ashworth to become new Duchess. The room tilted. Arabella reached for the back of a chair to steady herself, her eyes racing over the words, though each one cut like a blade. Following the quiet dissolution of his previous marriage, Lady Catherine, daughter of the Earl of Thornbury, has long been a close companion of the Duke. Society speculates that the engagement will be announced formally at the Thornbury Ball next month. Lady Catherine Ashworth. Arabella knew that name. She knew it very well indeed. Catherine had been a fixture at their wedding, standing near the back of the church with an expression of perfect composure that had struck Arabella as strange even then. Catherine had called at their London house more often than any other acquaintance, always with some excuse: a book to return, a recipe to share, a piece of gossip too urgent to wait. Catherine had smiled at Arabella with honeyed words, while her eyes calculated and measured, and found her wanting. And now Catherine would be the new Duchess of Kingsmere. "Your Grace," Margaret said again, her voice trembling, "you must write to him now, before it is too late, before he marries that woman." Arabella lowered the newspaper slowly, her hands steadier than she expected. Her heart was racing, but her mind had gone very still, the way it always did in moments of true crisis. She thought of the letter that had destroyed her marriage, the forged letters, the false witnesses, the carefully constructed evidence. She thought of Catherine's cool smile and calculating eyes. She thought of Edwin, Julian's cousin, who had always been too handsome and too charming and too interested in Arabella's conversations at family dinners. And she understood, with a clarity that was almost painful, that her marriage had not simply unraveled. Her marriage had been murdered, deliberately, methodically, and with great care, and she was carrying the only heir to the Kingsmere dukedom inside her body, while a woman who had orchestrated her destruction prepared to take her place. 200 miles away, Julian Pembroke stood before the mirror in his dressing room and did not recognize the man staring back at him. The face was the same, the strong jaw, the grey eyes, the dark hair touched with silver at the temples despite his 33 years. But there was something different behind the eyes. Something hollow. 4 months had passed since he had last seen his wife. 4 months of throwing himself into his duties, of attending Parliament, of managing his estates, of accepting invitations to every dinner and ball and shooting party, in the hope that exhaustion would bring him sleep. It had not. Night after night, he lay in his cold bed and saw Arabella's face as she had looked in that final moment. Her composure cracking, her hands reaching for him, her voice breaking as she swore her innocence. "I have never loved anyone but you." He pushed the memory away with practiced force. She had lied to him. The evidence had been incontrovertible. The letters, the witness statements, the dates and places that aligned with her absences from home. He had seen it with his own eyes. He had verified it through his solicitor, a man whose discretion and thoroughness were beyond reproach. And yet there were moments, in the dark hours before dawn, when doubt crept in like fog through a cracked window, small inconsistencies that his mind had catalogued but refused to examine. The fact that Arabella's maid, Margaret, had sworn under oath that her mistress had never been alone with Edwin. The fact that the coachman who had supposedly driven her to her assignations had disappeared before Julian's solicitor could question him further. The fact that Edwin himself, when confronted, had laughed in Julian's face and called the accusations absurd, then promptly left for the continent without staying to defend his honor. None of it mattered now. The divorce had been granted. Arabella had accepted the settlement without protest. She had not written to him, not once. Not a single word of denial or pleading or explanation. If she were innocent, surely she would have fought harder. Surely she would have demanded a hearing. Surely she would have done something, anything, other than disappear into the silence. The door opened behind him, and he turned to find his sister, Lady Eleanor Stanhope, entering without waiting for permission. Eleanor had never been one for social niceties, least of all with her older brother. She was 5 years his junior, sharp-tongued and sharp-eyed, with their mother's copper hair and their father's stubborn chin. She had been the only person who had dared to question his decision, and he had been avoiding her ever since. "Don't look at me like that," she said, settling herself into the armchair by the window. "You have been avoiding my calls for weeks. I had no choice but to ambush you. I have been busy. You have been hiding." She fixed him with a gaze that missed nothing. "And before you ask, yes, I have seen the newspapers. Everyone has seen the newspapers. Mother is beside herself with joy, which tells you everything you need to know about the match." Julian turned back to the mirror, adjusting his cravat with unnecessary precision. "Lady Catherine is a respected member of society. She comes from a good family. She is well suited to the position. She is a viper in silk gloves, and you know it. Or you would know it, if you were thinking clearly, which you are not." Eleanor's voice softened. "Julian, it has only been 4 months. You cannot possibly be ready to marry again. And to Catherine, of all people? She was circling you like a hawk around a wounded rabbit from the moment Arabella left." "Arabella did not leave. She was dismissed." "Semantics." Eleanor waved her hand impatiently. "The point remains. What do you actually know about Catherine? What do you know about any of this? You received a letter full of accusations, you confronted Arabella, and you cast her out before the dust could settle. Did you ever stop to wonder who sent that letter? Who collected all that evidence? Who stood to gain from the destruction of your marriage?" Julian's hands stilled on his cravat. The letter was anonymous, but the evidence spoke for itself. Did it? Or did it speak with a voice you were too angry to question? Eleanor rose from her chair and crossed to him, her reflection appearing beside his in the mirror. "I was there, Julian. I saw you and Arabella together before all this happened. I saw the way she looked at you, as though you had hung the stars in the sky. Does that sound like a woman planning an affair? Does that sound like a woman capable of the kind of deception you accuse her of?" "She might have been pretending. She might have been," Eleanor conceded. "But I have known liars, and I have known women in love, and Arabella was not pretending. Whatever evidence you saw, whatever accusations you believed, I am telling you that something is wrong. Something is rotten at the heart of this, and you are too busy licking your wounds to see it." For a long moment, Julian said nothing. His sister's words had struck something deep within him, something he had been trying desperately to bury. The doubt. The endless, corrosive doubt that had been eating at him since the day Arabella walked out of his life. But doubt was not proof, and pride was a fortress not easily breached. "I have made my decision," he said finally. "The matter is closed." "Is it?" Eleanor stepped back, her expression unreadable. "Then tell me this. Have you heard anything from Arabella since she left? Any word at all? She accepted the settlement, that is all. Nothing else? No letters? No messages? No pleas for you to reconsider? Nothing." Eleanor nodded slowly, as though this confirmed something she had already suspected. "Then she is either the most cold-blooded woman in England, or she is protecting something, or someone. And I wonder, brother, if you have ever stopped to consider which of those possibilities is the truth." She left without waiting for an answer, the door closing softly behind her. Julian stood alone before the mirror, his reflection staring back at him with hollow eyes, and for the first time in 4 months, he allowed himself to truly think about his wife. Where was she now? What was she doing? Did she ever think of him, or had she already moved on to whatever life she had built for herself in Bath? And why, after everything, did the thought of her still feel like a knife between his ribs? The Thornbury ball was held 3 weeks later, on an evening when the June air was soft with the scent of roses, and the London season was at its glittering height. The Earl of Thornbury's townhouse was one of the finest in Mayfair, its ballroom capable of holding 300 guests, and tonight, it seemed every one of those guests had accepted the invitation. The cream of society drifted through the candlelit rooms in a swirl of silk and jewels, their voices rising and falling like music, their eyes bright with the particular excitement that came from knowing they were witnessing history. For tonight, it was whispered, the Duke of Kingsmere would formally announce his engagement to Lady Catherine Ashworth. Catherine herself moved through the crowd like a queen surveying her domain. She was beautiful, there was no denying it, tall and golden-haired, with porcelain skin and eyes the color of summer sky. Her gown was pale blue silk, the exact shade to complement her coloring, and diamonds glittered at her throat and ears. She smiled at everyone, spoke to everyone, charmed everyone, and all the while her eyes tracked the room with the cold precision of a general before battle. She was looking for someone. She found him in the card room, standing apart from the players with a glass of brandy in his hand and an expression of profound disinterest on his face. Julian had arrived late, as he always did, and had made no effort to join the festivities. He looked, Catherine thought with a flicker of irritation, like a man attending his own funeral rather than his own engagement celebration. "Julian, darling." She glided to his side, slipping her hand through his arm with practiced intimacy. "Everyone is asking for you. You cannot hide in here all evening." "I am not hiding. I am observing. You are brooding. There is a difference." She smiled up at him, her expression a perfect blend of affection and gentle reproach. "Come, dance with me. Let them see us together. This is meant to be our night." Julian looked down at her, and for a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his grey eyes that might have been doubt, but then it was gone, replaced by the careful neutrality he had worn like armor for months. "Very well, one dance." He led her onto the floor as the orchestra struck up a waltz, and the crowd parted before them like water before a ship. All eyes followed the Duke of Kingsmere and his future bride as they turned and swayed beneath the glittering chandeliers. Catherine held her head high, her smile radiant, her triumph complete. She had waited years for this moment. She had planned and schemed and sacrificed, and now her reward was within reach. The title, the estates, the wealth, the position, all of it would be hers, and all she had needed to do was remove one inconvenient obstacle. Arabella Whitmore. Plain, bookish, unremarkable Arabella, who had somehow captured the attention of the most eligible duke in England. Arabella, who had no title of her own, no great fortune, no family connections to speak of. Arabella, who should have been beneath Julian's notice, but had somehow become his wife. Catherine's smile did not waver, but something cold and hard settled in her chest. She had handled Arabella. She had handled her thoroughly. The letters, the witnesses, the carefully planted evidence. It had taken months to construct, but the result had been worth every moment of effort. Arabella was gone, her reputation destroyed, her future reduced to a quiet life of obscurity in whatever provincial town she had fled to. And now Julian was Catherine's. "You seem distracted," she murmured, as they turned past the orchestra. "Is something troubling you?" Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I am merely tired. Parliament has been demanding." "Then you must rest. Once we are married, I shall make it my mission to ensure you are properly cared for." She let her fingers tighten on his shoulder, a possessive gesture she could not quite suppress. "You have been alone too long, Julian. You have had no one to look after you." "I have managed." "Barely," she laughed, a silvery sound that drew admiring glances from nearby dancers. "But that is all behind you now. We shall be so happy together, you and I. I shall be everything you need, everything you deserve." Julian said nothing. The music swelled around them, violins and cellos weaving together in a melody that should have been romantic, but somehow felt, to Catherine's sharp senses, like a lament. She studied his face, searching for some sign of the passion she had hoped to inspire, but found only the same distant courtesy he had shown her since the divorce. No matter. Passion could be cultivated. The important thing was that she would be his duchess. The title would be hers. The power would be hers. And Julian Pembroke would learn, in time, that she was far more than a replacement for his lost wife. She was his future. And if anyone tried to interfere with that future, she would deal with them just as she had dealt with Arabella. 3 days after the Thornbury ball, Julian sat alone in his study, staring at a letter he had just received. It had arrived by private courier, sealed with wax that bore no crest, and the handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, cramped and hurried, as though written in great agitation. He had almost thrown it away. He received dozens of letters each day, most of them tedious business matters that his secretary handled without troubling him. But something about this one had caught his attention. Something about the way his name was written, as though the writer had hesitated over each letter. "Now, With the letter open before him, he understood why. Your Grace, I served in your household for 3 years. I was a good servant, and I kept my peace when I should have spoken. But my conscience will no longer permit my silence. You were deceived. The letters you were shown were forgeries. The witnesses were paid. Your wife was innocent of every accusation made against her. I know this because I was the one who forged the letters. I was paid to do it by someone who wished to see the Duchess of Kingsmere destroyed. I will not name that person in this letter, for fear of what might happen to me, but I will tell you this. Lady Arabella never betrayed you. She loved you, and she was true to you, and you cast her aside on the basis of lies. I am leaving England. I cannot face what I have done. But before I go, I beg you to find your wife and make this right. She did not deserve what happened to her. And if you are the man I believe you to be, the man I watch treat his tenants with fairness and his servants with respect, then you will not rest until the truth is known. Forgive me. The letter was unsigned. Julian read it once, twice, 3 times. His hands had begun to tremble, and there was a roaring in his ears like the sound of the sea. The words blurred before his eyes, but their meaning was unmistakable. Forged, paid, innocent. He had cast her aside on the basis of lies. The brandy glass on his desk shattered against the far wall before he was even aware of throwing it. He was on his feet, his chest heaving, his mind racing through the implications. If the letter was true, if Arabella had been innocent, then everything he had done, everything he had believed, every cold word and hard look and final, unforgivable dismissal, had been wrong. He had divorced an innocent woman. He had destroyed her reputation. He had left her alone and friendless, believing the worst of her, while the real villain walked free. And he was about to marry someone else. No. The word tore from his throat, raw and desperate. No, this cannot be right. It cannot. But even as he denied it, he knew, deep in the place where truth lived, beneath all the layers of pride and anger and wounded dignity, he knew. He had known for months, if he were honest with himself. He had felt it in the sleepless hours, in the moments when her face appeared unbidden in his mind, in the persistent, nagging sense that something was terribly, irreparably wrong. He had let his pride blind him, and Arabella had paid the price. The door to the study opened, and his secretary appeared, his expression alarmed. Your Grace? I heard a crash. Send for my horse. Julian was already moving, pulling on his coat with jerky, urgent motions. Send word to the stable. I am leaving for Bath within the hour. Bath. But Your Grace, your appointments, the meeting with Lord Ashworth. Cancel them. Cancel everything. I do not care. Julian turned to face the man, and something in his expression made the secretary take a step backward. My wife is in Bath. She is innocent of everything I accused her of. And I am going to bring her home. The secretary's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. Your wife? Forgive me, Your Grace, but you are divorced. The Duchess is no longer. She is my wife, Julian said, and his voice was iron. She has always been my wife, and God help anyone who stands between us. The journey to Bath took 12 hours of hard riding, changing horses twice, and stopping only when the animals could go no further. Julian arrived at the modest Georgian townhouse, on the quiet crescent just as dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had thought of nothing but Arabella for every mile of the road. And now, standing before her door, he found himself paralyzed. What would he say to her? How could he possibly explain? He had accused her of the worst betrayal a wife could commit. He had refused to listen to her denials. He had cast her out with cold formality, as though their marriage had been nothing more than a business arrangement to be dissolved. How did a man apologize for that? How did a man make amends for destroying the woman he had sworn to love and protect? He did not know. But he had to try. He knocked. The door was opened by a maid he did not recognize, a young woman with a round face and startled eyes, who clearly had no idea she was facing a duke. Sir? Can I help you, sir? I am here to see Lady Arabella. His voice came out rougher than he intended. It is urgent. Lady Arabella is not receiving visitors at this hour, sir. If you would like to leave your card. It is urgent, Julian repeated. stepping forward with such authority that the maid instinctively backed away. Tell her that her husband is here. Tell her that Julian Pembroke, Duke of Kingsmere, wishes to speak with her. The maid's eyes widened. The Duke of... But she is not. That is, there is no Lady Arabella here, sir. Only Mrs. Whitmore. And she is... Julian. The voice came from the top of the stairs. Soft, tired, but unmistakably hers. Julian looked up, and the world stopped. Arabella stood on the landing, one hand resting on the banister, the other pressed against the small of her back. She was dressed simply, in a morning gown of pale grey muslin, and her dark hair was pulled back in a loose knot. Her face was thinner than he remembered, with shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. And her belly was round with child. His child. Julian's breath left him in a rush, as though he had been struck. He stared at her, at the unmistakable swell of her pregnancy, and felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place with devastating force. She had been carrying his child. When he had accused her, when he had cast her out, when he had stood in that cold drawing room and told her she was a liar and an adulteress, she had been carrying his child, and she had not told him. She had let him walk away without speaking a word of it. You are with child. His voice was barely a whisper. Arabella's hand tightened on the banister. I am. And it is. Yours. Her chin lifted, a flash of the spirit he remembered. It is yours. There has never been anyone else. There never was. But I will not have you here, Julian. You made your choice. You believed their lies over my truth. You left me. You are going to marry Lady Catherine. What possible reason could you have for being here now? Julian climbed the stairs slowly, one step at a time, his eyes never leaving her face. When he reached the landing, he stopped an arm's length away, close enough to touch but not daring to. I was wrong, he said, and the words felt like tearing something loose from his chest. I was wrong about everything. The letter, the evidence, it was all fabricated. I received a confession this morning, from one of the servants. They were paid to forge the letters. You were innocent. You were always innocent. And I, his voice broke. I destroyed our marriage because I was too proud to question what I thought I knew. Arabella stared at him. Her face had gone very pale, and he saw her hands trembling against her stomach. A confession, she repeated. You received a confession, and suddenly you believe me? After 4 months of silence? After leaving me to face this alone? She gestured at her belly, and her voice rose. I have been here, Julian, in this house, carrying your child, with no one but Margaret for company, while you were in London, dancing with Catherine Ashworth, and planning your next wedding. And now you come here, and tell me you were wrong, and you expect, what? Forgiveness? Absolution? For everything to go back to the way it was? No. He shook his head, his grey eyes bright with something that might have been tears. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it, but I am begging you, Arabella, to let me try to make this right. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can be the husband you deserved. It is too late. It is not too late. We are still married in the eyes of the church. The civil divorce can be reversed. The child can be born legitimate. You can come home, please. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, though her fingers remained cold and still in his grasp. Please come home. Arabella looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the war raging behind her eyes, the love she had once felt for him, the pain he had caused her, the fear of being hurt again. I want to believe you, she said quietly, but I do not know if I can. You broke something in me, Julian, something I am not sure can be fixed. Then let me try to fix it, he said. Let me stay. Let me prove to you that I am not the man who walked away from you. Before she could answer, the front door burst open below them, and Margaret rushed into the hall, her face white with alarm. Your Grace, Mrs. Whitmore, there are men outside. They are watching the house. I saw them from the upstairs window. 3 of them, in the alley across the street. Julian's head snapped toward the door. Watching the house? Who are they? I do not know, but they have been there since dawn. I thought they were merely passers-by, but they are not moving. They are waiting. Arabella's hand flew to her mouth. Someone knows you are here. Someone knows you came to find me. And in that moment, Julian understood. The confession letter, the timing of it, the fact that it had arrived just as his engagement to Catherine was about to be announced. Someone had wanted him to discover the truth. Someone had wanted him to come racing to Bath, and someone had been waiting for him to arrive. The trap was already closing around them, and the hunter, whoever it was watching from the shadows. Julian moved quickly. He pulled Arabella gently but firmly away from the landing, guiding her into the small sitting room that overlooked the back garden rather than the street. Margaret followed close behind, her eyes wide with fear. "Describe them," Julian commanded, his voice dropping to the clipped, authoritative tone of a man accustomed to crisis. "The men outside, what did they look like?" Margaret wrung her hands. "Rough-looking men, Your Grace. Not gentlemen. They wore labourers' clothes, but they had the look of men who hire themselves out for unpleasant work. I have seen their kind before, in London. They are the sort who collect debts and deliver threats." "3 of them, you said?" "Yes, Your Grace. One was tall, with a red beard. Another was heavy-set, with a scar above his left eye. The third was younger, thin as a rail, with a mean face." Julian filed the descriptions away. They meant nothing to him personally, but he had connections. Men who could investigate. Men who could trace hired muscle back to their employers. The question was whether they would have time for such investigations before whoever was behind this made their next move. "Someone does not want us to reconcile," he said, turning to face Arabella. "Someone went to great lengths to destroy our marriage, and now that I know the truth, they are trying to prevent me from reaching you." Arabella had sunk into a chair by the window, her face still pale, but her expression thoughtful rather than panicked. "Catherine," she said quietly. "It has to be Catherine. She was the one who benefited most from our separation. She was the one who positioned herself to take my place. And she was the one who visited our house constantly, who had access to our servants, who could have orchestrated the whole scheme." "I know." Julian's jaw tightened. "I should have seen it. She played me for a fool, and I let her. I was so blinded by my own wounded pride that I never once questioned her motives." "Pride has always been your weakness," Arabella said, and there was no malice in her voice, only a sad truth. "I knew that when I married you, I just never imagined it would be turned against me." The words cut deeper than any accusation could have. Julian knelt before her chair, taking both her hands in his, heedless of Margaret's presence. "I will make this right," he said. "I swear it. But first, I need to get you somewhere safe. If Catherine has men watching this house, she knows I am here. She will not stop at mere surveillance." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Catherine has invested years in her scheme. She will not let it unravel now. If she thinks you are a threat to her engagement, to her future as Duchess of Kingsmere, she will take more drastic measures." He hesitated, then said the words he had been dreading. "You are carrying the heir to the dukedom. If Catherine knows that, you are in grave danger." Arabella's hands tightened on his. "She does not know. I have told no one except Margaret. I have not left this house since I arrived in Bath. The servants here are loyal. No one knows." "Someone might have guessed. Someone might have been watching you more closely than you realized." Julian rose to his feet, his mind racing. "Pack only what you need. We are leaving within the hour." "Leaving? For where?" "My estate in Scotland. Kingsmere Castle. It is remote, defensible, and staffed by people who have served my family for generations. No one will reach you there." Arabella shook her head. "I cannot simply run, Julian. Running is what I have been doing for 4 months, and it has brought me nothing but loneliness. If Catherine is truly behind this, I want to face her. I want to expose what she has done. And we will. I promise you, we will. But not now. Not when you are carrying our child, and there are unknown men watching your house." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the urgency in his voice. "Please, Arabella, I have already failed you once. Let me protect you now." For a long moment, she searched his face, looking for something. Sincerity, perhaps, or the man she had married, or simply a reason to trust him again. Whatever she found made her nod slowly. "Very well. But I have conditions." "Name them." "I will go to Scotland with you, but I am not returning to London as your wife. Not yet. Not until I am certain that I can trust you. Not until I know that you truly believe in my innocence. and not simply because a letter told you so. Julian nodded, though the words stung. Agreed. And when this is over, when Catherine is exposed, and the truth is known, I will decide for myself whether our marriage can be salvaged. I will not be pressured. I will not be commanded. I will make my own choice. Agreed. Arabella held his gaze for another moment, then rose from her chair with the careful grace of a woman far advanced in pregnancy. Then let us go. Margaret, please pack my things. Only the essentials. As Margaret hurried from the room, Julian moved to the window and peered through the curtains into the quiet street below. The morning light was growing stronger now, painting the crescent in shades of gold and shadow. For a moment, he saw nothing out of the ordinary, just the neat row of Georgian houses, the wrought iron railings, the plane trees stirring in the breeze. Then he saw them. 3 men, exactly as Margaret had described. They had moved closer, now standing on the corner of the crescent, with their heads together in conversation. As Julian watched, the tall one with the red beard looked up at the house, his eyes fixing on the very window where Julian stood. Julian stepped back quickly, but it was too late. The man had seen him. Arabella, he said quietly, we need to move faster. They know I am here. The escape was not dramatic. Julian had learned long ago that the best exits were the quietest ones. He sent Margaret out the front door first, with instructions to walk to the market and purchase provisions for a journey. The men on the corner watched her go but did not follow. She was not their target. 20 minutes later, a tradesman's cart pulled up to the back of the house, driven by a man Julian had paid handsomely for his discretion. Arabella, wrapped in a dark cloak despite the mild weather, climbed into the back of the cart and concealed herself beneath a pile of empty sacks. Julian waited 5 agonizing minutes, then left through the front door alone, walking directly toward the 3 men on the corner as though he had not a care in the world. Gentlemen, he said, tipping his hat with cold courtesy as he passed them. Fine morning for standing about, is it not? The red-bearded man started, clearly not expecting to be addressed. Your Grace, he managed, touching his cap in a reflexive gesture of deference. We were just... I know what you were doing. You may tell your employer that the Duke of Kingsmere does not appreciate being watched, and you may tell her that if she continues this game, she will find me a far less forgiving opponent than my wife. He did not wait for a response. He walked on, his pace unhurried, his expression calm, while his heart hammered against his ribs. At the end of the crescent, he turned the corner and broke into a run. The tradesman's cart was waiting in a mews 2 streets away. Julian vaulted into the back, pulled the sacks aside, and found Arabella looking up at him with wide eyes. Did they follow you? I do not think so, but we must not linger. He rapped on the side of the cart, and it lurched into motion. We will take the cart to the outskirts of the city, then hire a coach. By tonight, we will be on the Great North Road. By tomorrow, we will be in Scotland. Arabella sat up slowly, brushing straw from her cloak. Her face was pale but composed, and there was something in her eyes that had not been there before, a spark of the fire he remembered from their early days together. You confronted them, she said. You walked right up to them. I wanted to see if they would flinch. They did. And what did you learn? That they are hired men, not true believers. They are being paid to watch, but they are not willing to risk their necks. They will report back to whoever hired them, and that person will have to decide how far they are willing to go. Arabella nodded slowly. Catherine will not stop. She has come too far. She has sacrificed too much. If she learns that I am carrying your child, she will see me as the ultimate threat. Then we must ensure she does not learn. Not yet. Not until we are ready. Julian reached into his coat and withdrew a folded sheet of paper. This is the confession letter I received. It is unsigned, but the handwriting may be identifiable. If we can find the servant who wrote it, we can trace the payment back to Catherine. That, combined with your testimony, and whatever else we can uncover, will be enough to expose her. And the 3 men watching the house? They will tell her you came to find me. Let them. Catherine already knows I have left London. She will deduce my destination quickly enough. What she will not know is whether I have succeeded in bringing you with me. He smiled, a hard expression with no warmth in it. Let her wonder. Let her panic. A panicked opponent makes mistakes. The cart rattled on through the streets of Bath. carrying them past the elegant crescents and terraces, past the pump rooms and the abbey, past the lives they had led before everything changed. Arabella sat in silence, one hand resting protectively on her belly, her eyes fixed on the man who had once been her husband and now might be again. She wanted to trust him. She wanted it more than she had wanted anything in months. But trust, once shattered, did not mend quickly. It required time and proof and 1,000 small acts of faith. Julian had taken the first step by coming to find her. But there were many steps still ahead, and the road to Scotland was long. The journey north took 6 days. They travelled by coach, with Margaret in attendance, and 2 of Julian's most trusted men riding alongside as guards. The pace was slower than Julian would have liked, constrained by Arabella's condition and the need to stop frequently, but it was steady. Each mile put more distance between them and whatever danger lurked in London. As they travelled, they talked, more than they had talked in all the months of their marriage. Julian told her about his childhood at Kingsmere, about the father who had died when he was 15, about the weight of the dukedom that had settled on his shoulders before he was old enough to understand it. Arabella told him about her own family, the Whitmores of Somerset, who had once been wealthy, but had lost everything in a series of unwise investments. She had been raised to marry well, she admitted, but she had never expected to catch the eye of a duke. "I was terrified the night we met," she said, as the coach rolled through the Yorkshire countryside. "You were so grand, so remote. I thought you would find me dull." "I found you refreshing," Julian replied. "Everyone else at that dinner party was trying to impress me. You were the only person who told me I was wrong about something. I told you that your opinion of the Corn Laws was short-sighted. I cannot believe I was so bold. You were right, as it happens. I had not considered the impact on small farmers." He smiled, a genuine smile that softened the hard lines of his face. "I knew then that I wanted to marry you, not because of your family or your connections, but because you were not afraid to challenge me." Arabella looked down at her hands. "And then I stopped challenging you. After we married, I was so afraid of displeasing you that I became quiet, dutiful, boring." "You were never boring." "I was. I was so terrified of losing your regard that I became the kind of wife I thought you wanted, rather than the woman you had actually chosen. And when the accusations came, I had no practice in fighting back. I had spent our entire marriage trying to be agreeable, and it left me defenseless." Julian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. "I did not realize. I thought you were happy. I thought the quiet was contentment. The quiet was fear. Fear that I was not good enough for you. Fear that someone would see through me and realize I did not belong in your world." "You belonged," he said fiercely. "You always belonged. I should have told you that. I should have made sure you knew it." The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and tentative, like the first green shoots after a long winter. Arabella did not respond, but she did not withdraw either. She simply sat with the words, letting them settle, letting them begin the slow work of healing wounds that had festered for too long. Kingsmere Castle stood on a rocky promontory overlooking the North Sea, its grey stone walls rising from the landscape as though they had grown there. It was an ancient place, parts of it dating back to the 13th century, though successive generations of Pembrokes had added wings and towers and modern conveniences. The result was a sprawling, magnificent, slightly chaotic structure that was as much a part of Julian's identity as his own name. The servants had been alerted to their arrival, and the castle was prepared. Fires blazed in the great hall, fresh flowers adorned the rooms, and the kitchens had been stocked with enough food to feed a small army. The housekeeper, Mrs. McAllister, was a formidable Scottish woman who had run the castle for 30 years and who greeted Julian with the familiarity of someone who had known him since he was in leading strings. "Your Grace," she said, bobbing a curtsy that was more ceremonial than subservient. "We were not expecting you until Michaelmas. Change of plans, Mrs. McAllister. This is Lady Arabella. She will be staying with us for the foreseeable future. Please see that she has the best guest chambers and whatever else she requires." Mrs. McAllister's sharp eyes travelled from Julian to Arabella, taking in the younger woman's pale face and rounded belly with a single comprehensive glance. If she was surprised to see the Duke's former wife in such a condition, she did not show it. "Of course, Your Grace. I shall prepare the rose chamber. It has the best light and the finest views of the sea. Thank you, Arabella said quietly. I am grateful for your hospitality. 'Tis no trouble at all, my lady. The castle has been too quiet these many months. It will be good to have voices in the halls again. As Mrs. McAllister bustled away to prepare the rooms, Julian turned to Arabella. You will be safe here. No one knows of this place except my family and my closest associates. Even if Catherine discovers our location, she will not be able to reach you. The castle has withstood sieges. It can withstand one ambitious noblewoman. And you? Arabella asked. What will you do? I will return to London. I need to gather evidence against Catherine. I need to find the servant who wrote that confession, trace the payments, and build a case that cannot be dismissed. And I need to end my engagement to Catherine in a way that leaves no doubt about her guilt. Arabella felt a chill run through her. She will not take it well. She will fight you. Let her fight. I have spent 4 months letting pride and anger guide my actions. I will not make that mistake again. He stepped closer, reaching for her hand. I will come back to you, Arabella. I swear it. And when I do, I will bring the truth with me. She wanted to tell him to be careful. She wanted to tell him not to go. But the words lodged in her throat, trapped by the fear of vulnerability, by the memory of how easily he had believed the worst of her. Instead, she simply nodded, her fingers tightening around his for a brief moment before releasing. Godspeed, Julian. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. Wait for me, he said. Please. And then he was gone, striding out of the great hall with his cloak billowing behind him, leaving Arabella alone in the ancient castle, with nothing but the sound of the sea and the faint, fluttering movement of the child within her. London in August was hot and close, the streets reeking of refuse, and the Thames reduced to a sluggish brown trickle. The fashionable set had retreated to their country estates, leaving the city to the merchants and the servants and those who had business too urgent to postpone. Julian was among the latter. He had been in London for 3 days, working from his townhouse with a small army of investigators at his command. The confession letter had been his starting point, and from it, he had begun to trace a web of deception that was both more extensive and more disturbing than he had imagined. The servant who had written the letter was a man named Thomas Briggs, who had been employed in the Kingsmere household as a junior footman. He had disappeared shortly after Arabella's departure, telling the housekeeper that he had received word of a family emergency in Yorkshire. No one had thought to question it at the time. Servants came and went, and the household had been in chaos following the divorce. But Julian's investigators had tracked Briggs to a small village in Kent, where he was living under an assumed name and working as a stable hand. When confronted, Briggs had broken down completely, confessing everything between sobs of terror and guilt. He had been approached by a woman, a lady, well-dressed and well-spoken, who had offered him £500 to forge letters between the Duchess and Mr. Edwin Pembroke. The letters were to suggest an affair, with specific dates and places that would appear damning when examined. Briggs, who had some skill with calligraphy and a pressing need for money, had agreed. The woman had provided samples of both the Duchess's and Mr. Pembroke's handwriting, obtained from letters they had written to various correspondents. Briggs had practiced for weeks, perfecting the forgeries, before delivering the finished letters to his employer. And the witnesses, Julian had demanded, his voice barely controlled. The innkeeper, the maid, the coachman? Paid, Your Grace. All paid. The lady arranged everything. I never knew her name, I swear it. She always met me in the park, always wore a veil. But I heard her speak once, to the coachman. She had a voice like cut glass, and she called him by name. Jenkins, she called him. Jenkins. Julian recognized the name. Jenkins had been a coachman employed by the Earl of Thornbury, Catherine's father. The net was closing, but Briggs was only one piece of the puzzle. Julian needed more. Evidence that would stand up in court. Evidence that would convince not only the authorities but also society at large. He needed to prove that Catherine had orchestrated the entire scheme, from the forged letters, to the paid witnesses, to the anonymous tip that had first planted the seeds of suspicion in his mind. And so his investigators dug deeper. They tracked down the innkeeper, who admitted to being paid for his testimony. They found the maid, who broke down and confessed that she had been threatened with dismissal if she did not cooperate. They located the coachman, Jenkins, who proved more stubborn, but eventually cracked under the pressure of threatened legal action. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. And at the center of it all, like a spider at the heart of a web, sat Lady Catherine Ashworth. Julian had known it would be her. From the moment he read the confession letter, he had known. But knowing and proving were different things, and the evidence he had gathered, while compelling, was largely circumstantial. The witnesses could place Catherine at meetings with Briggs. The payment records could show large sums of money withdrawn from her accounts around the time the witnesses were bribed. But none of it was a direct confession. None of it was the smoking gun that would destroy her completely. He needed more. And he knew exactly where to find it. Catherine Ashworth received the Duke of Kingsmere in the drawing room of her father's townhouse, a room decorated in the height of fashion with gilded furniture and silk draperies and porcelain figurines that cost more than most people earned in a year. She was dressed in pale pink, her golden hair arranged in elaborate curls, her expression a careful mask of pleasure and surprise. "Julian, what a delightful surprise. I thought you were in the country." She extended her hand for him to kiss, a coy smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I have missed you terribly. London is so dreary without you." Julian did not kiss her hand. He did not sit down. He stood in the center of the drawing room, his face as hard as the granite cliffs of Kingsmere, and regarded her with an expression that made her smile falter. "I know," he said. 2 words. Simple, direct, devastating. Catherine's hand dropped to her side. "You know, whatever do you mean? I know what you did. I know about Thomas Briggs and the forged letters. I know about the bribed witnesses and the false testimony. I know that you spent months orchestrating the destruction of my marriage, also that you could take Arabella's place as Duchess of Kingsmere." The color drained from Catherine's face, but she did not crumble. Her chin lifted, and her eyes took on a hard, calculating gleam. "Those are serious accusations. I assume you have proof." "I have confessions from every person you paid. I have records of the withdrawals from your accounts. I have a letter, in Briggs's handwriting, detailing your entire scheme. It is more than enough to see you ruined." "Then why are you here, telling me this, instead of at the magistrate's office?" A cold smile curved her lips. "Because you do not have enough. You have the word of servants and tradesmen against the word of an earl's daughter. In a court of law, I know whose word will carry more weight." Julian had anticipated this. Catherine was many things: scheming, manipulative, utterly ruthless, but she was not stupid. She knew the power of her position. She knew that society would close ranks around one of its own. "You are right," he said. "The courts might favor you, but I am not planning to take this to court." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous murmur. "I am planning to take this to society. Every drawing room, every ballroom, every dinner party in London will know what you have done. Your father's influence will not protect you from the whispers. Your beauty will not shield you from the scandal. You will become a pariah, Catherine, the woman who destroyed a marriage for her own ambition. No respectable family will receive you. No gentleman will offer for you. You will spend the rest of your days in lonely obscurity, and everyone will know exactly why." Catherine's composure cracked. A flash of genuine fear appeared in her eyes, quickly suppressed but unmistakable. "You would not dare. The scandal would touch you as well. People would say you were a fool for believing the lies in the first place." "Let them say it. I have been a fool. I have been proud and blind and unforgivably cruel to an innocent woman. I will spend the rest of my life atoning for what I did to Arabella. But I will not let you escape the consequences of your actions. You tried to destroy her. You tried to take everything from her. And I am here to tell you that you have failed." "What do you want?" Catherine's voice was sharp now, all pretense of charm abandoned. "If you are not here to have me arrested, what do you want?" "I want your confession, written, signed, and witnessed. A full account of everything you did, from the moment you first conceived of the scheme to the moment you planted the final piece of evidence. And in return? In return, I will not make that confession public, unless you ever try to harm Arabella again. You will leave London. You will retire to your father's country estate. You will live quietly, without scandal, without prosecution. But you will know, for the rest of your life, that your ambitions are dead. You will never be a duchess. You will never have power or influence, or the respect of society. You will have nothing but the knowledge of your own wickedness. Catherine stared at him for a long moment. He could see the calculations running behind her eyes, the weighing of options, the search for some escape route that would preserve her dreams. But there was none. He had blocked every exit. The only question was whether she would choose disgrace or obscurity. And Catherine, being Catherine, chose survival. Very well, she said at last, her voice flat and cold. I will give you your confession. But know this, Julian. I did not act alone. Your cousin Edwin was more than willing to help me. He wanted Arabella for himself, and he thought that if she were disgraced, she would have no choice but to turn to him. Julian's blood ran cold. Edwin? He was the one who suggested the affair as the premise. He was the one who provided samples of his own handwriting for the forgeries. He thought that once you divorced her, she would be desperate and alone, and he could sweep in and claim her. Catherine laughed, a bitter sound. But you ruined that too, did you not? By the time he returned from the continent, she was already hidden away in Bath. He never found her. The revelation hit Julian like a physical blow. Edwin, his own cousin, his childhood companion, the man he had trusted like a brother, had been part of the conspiracy, had been the architect of his ruin. I will deal with Edwin, Julian said, his voice barely controlled. But first, I will have your confession. Now, write it. Catherine moved to the writing desk in the corner, her movements stiff with suppressed fury. She sat down, took up a quill, and began to write. Julian watched every stroke of the pen, ensuring that the account was complete and accurate. When she finished, he made her sign it, then summoned 2 of the Thornbury servants to witness her signature. When it was done, he folded the confession and placed it in his coat pocket. You have made the wise choice, he said. Remember the terms of our agreement. If I ever hear your name spoken in connection with my wife again, this confession will be published in every newspaper in England. Catherine did not look at him. She sat motionless at the desk, her golden head bowed, her dreams crumbling around her like the gilded porcelain that filled her father's house. Julian left without another word. There was nothing more to say. The confrontation with Edwin was uglier. Julian found his cousin at his London club, drinking brandy in the smoking room, with the casual arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. He was handsome, as he had always been, with dark curls and a ready smile and an easy charm that had made him a favorite of society hostesses. That charm evaporated the moment he saw Julian's face. Cousin. Edwin rose from his chair, his smile faltering. I did not expect to see you. I heard you had gone north. I came back. Julian did not sit. He did not accept the offer of a drink. He simply stood, blocking Edwin's exit, his presence filling the room like a thundercloud. I know everything, Catherine confessed. The color drained from Edwin's face. I do not know what you mean. Do not insult me by pretending. I know you were part of the scheme. I know you provided the handwriting samples. I know you wanted Arabella for yourself, and you thought that destroying her marriage to me would somehow make her yours. Edwin's eyes darted toward the door, as though calculating his chances of escape. But Julian was between him and the exit, and there was something in the Duke's expression that promised violence if pushed too far. It was Catherine's idea, he said quickly. She came to me with the plan. She said that if Arabella were out of the way, you would turn to her, and I could have Arabella. It seemed reasonable, at the time. Reasonable. Julian's voice was ice. You destroyed an innocent woman's reputation, you nearly destroyed her life, and you call it reasonable. I did not think it would go so far. I thought you would simply send her away, and I would be there to comfort her, and she would what? Fall into your arms? Love you? Julian took a step closer, and Edwin flinched. Arabella never loved you. She never even liked you. She tolerated you because you were my cousin, and you repaid her kindness with treachery. What are you going to do? Edwin's voice was barely a whisper. Are you going to challenge me? Name your seconds? I have the right to defend my honor. Honor? Julian laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. You have no honor to defend. You are a coward and a schemer, and I would sooner duel a stable boy than give you the dignity of a gentleman's challenge. Then what? You are going to leave England, tonight. You will go to the continent, and you will stay there. You will not return. You will not write. You will not communicate with anyone in this country. If I ever hear your name again, if I ever learn that you have set foot on English soil, I will ensure that every detail of your involvement in this scheme becomes public knowledge. Your reputation will be destroyed, your friends will abandon you, your name will become a curse." Edwin's mouth opened and closed. He looked, Julian thought, like a fish gasping on a riverbank. "You cannot, you would not." "I can, I will. And if you ever try to contact Arabella again, in any way, I will do far worse." Julian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any shout. "She is carrying my child. If you so much as breathe in her direction, I will end you. Do you understand?" Edwin nodded frantically. "Yes, yes, I understand. I will go. I will leave tonight." "Good." Julian stepped back, straightening his coat. "I am glad we understand each other." He left the club without looking back. Outside, the evening air was cool against his heated skin, and the streets were beginning to fill with carriages and pedestrians enjoying the relative cool of the twilight hours. Julian stood on the steps for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the rage drain from his body. It was done. Catherine was neutralized. Edwin was banished. The truth was secure in his pocket, in the form of a signed confession that would ensure neither of them ever threatened Arabella again. Now all that remained was the hardest part of all, winning back the woman he had wronged. The journey back to Scotland was interminable. Julian travelled by coach, alone, the confession tucked safely in his breast pocket. He had dismissed his guards, confident that the danger was past, and now he had nothing but the endless road and his own thoughts for company. He thought about Arabella. He thought about the day they had met, at a dinner party in Somerset, when she had argued with him about agricultural policy, and he had been captivated by her passion and her intelligence. He thought about their wedding day, when she had walked down the aisle of St. George's with her hand trembling on her father's arm, her eyes bright with hope and fear and love. He thought about the months that followed, when he had been so absorbed in his duties that he had failed to notice her growing quiet, her retreat into a shell of dutiful compliance. He had loved her, but he had not cherished her. He had wanted her, but he had not protected her. He had married her, but he had not truly made her his partner. And when the test came, when the lies were presented and the accusations made, he had failed her utterly. The confession in his pocket was justice, but it was not redemption. Redemption would require something more. Redemption would require him to become the man he should have been all along, a man worthy of Arabella's trust, worthy of her love, worthy of the child she carried. He did not know if he was that man, but he was determined to try. Kingsmere Castle appeared on the horizon as the sun was setting, its grey walls glowing rose gold in the fading light. The sea beyond was calm, a sheet of silver stretching to the edge of the world, and gulls wheeled overhead with their familiar plaintive cries. Julian's heart was pounding as the coach pulled into the courtyard. He had sent no word ahead. He had wanted to arrive unannounced, to see Arabella's face when she first learned what he had accomplished. But now, standing before the great oak doors, he felt a fear that no confrontation with Catherine or Edwin had inspired. What if she did not want him back? What if the wounds he had inflicted were too deep to heal? What if she had decided, in the weeks he had been gone, that she was better off without him? The doors opened before he could knock, and Mrs. McAllister appeared, her weathered face breaking into a smile of genuine pleasure. "Your Grace, we were not expecting you until next week at the earliest. Come in, come in. Lady Arabella is in the library. She spends most evenings there, reading by the fire." "How is she?" Julian asked, his voice more urgent than he intended. "Is she well?" "Well enough, though the bairn gives her no peace at night. Kicks like a prize fighter, she says." Mrs. McAllister's eyes twinkled. "She will be glad to see you, Your Grace. She has been watching the road these 3 days past." The library at Kingsmere was a vast room, 2 stories high, with shelves that held centuries of Pembroke learning. A fire crackled in the massive hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and in a high-backed chair before the flames, Arabella sat with a book open on her lap. She looked up when he entered, and her face underwent a transformation that Julian would remember for the rest of his life. Hope, fear, joy, and uncertainty chased each other across her features, and her hands tightened on the book, as though she needed something to hold on to. "You came back," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I told you I would." He crossed the room slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished, but she did not retreat. She set the book aside and rose from her chair, her belly now pronounced enough to make the movement slightly awkward. "The baby," she said, pressing a hand to her side. "It knows your voice, I think. It started moving the moment you spoke." Julian stopped an arm's length away, his eyes fixed on her face. "I have the confession," he said. "Catherine admitted everything. Edwin was involved as well. He has been banished to the continent. They will never trouble you again." Relief flooded Arabella's features, but it was tempered by something else. Something that looked like caution. "And what happens now?" "That depends on you." Julian reached into his coat and withdrew the confession, holding it out to her. "This is yours. Do with it what you will. If you wish to publish it, to clear your name publicly, I will support you. If you wish to return to London as the Duchess of Kingsmere, I will stand beside you. If you wish to remain here, in Scotland, far from society and its judgments, I will stay with you. Whatever you choose, I will honor it." Arabella took the confession, but did not look at it. Her eyes remained fixed on his face, searching, measuring, weighing. "And if I choose to remain divorced from you? If I choose to raise this child alone, far from the man who believed the worst of me?" The words cut, but Julian did not flinch. "Then I will accept your decision. I will provide for you and the child, generously, and without condition. I will not pressure you. I will not command you. I have done enough damage with my pride and my assumptions. If you cannot forgive me, I will understand." "But you would still want to be part of the child's life?" "Yes." His voice cracked on the word. "I would want that very much, but I will not force it. I will not use my position or my power to take anything from you that you are not willing to give." Arabella was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled in the hearth, and outside the window, the last light of sunset faded into the deep blue of twilight. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful, almost wondering. "I spent months hating you," she said. "I lay awake at night, imagining all the things I would say to you, if I ever had the chance. I rehearsed speeches full of anger and accusation. I dreamed of watching you suffer as I had suffered. But now you are here, and you have done everything I could have asked, and I find that the anger has faded. Not disappeared, but faded." Julian waited, scarcely breathing. "I do not know if I can trust you again," she continued. "Trust is not rebuilt in a day, or a week, or even a month. It will take time, and patience, and proof. You will have to demonstrate, over and over, that you are the man I thought I married, the man who listens, the man who questions his own assumptions, the man who is not too proud to admit when he is wrong." "I am that man," Julian said, "or I will become him, whatever it takes." Arabella stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender that always clung to her hair. "Then we will try," she said quietly, slowly, carefully, "but we will try." The relief that swept through Julian was so powerful that his knees nearly buckled. He reached for her hands, holding them gently, as though she were made of something precious and fragile. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I do not deserve it, but I swear I will spend the rest of my life earning it." "You had better," Arabella said, and there was a glimmer of the old fire in her eyes, the spark that had first drawn him to her. "Because if you ever doubt me again, Julian Pembroke, I will make your life considerably more unpleasant than Catherine ever could." Despite everything, the months of pain, the weeks of uncertainty, the long road still ahead, Julian found himself smiling. "I do not doubt it for a moment." And there, in the firelit library of a Scottish castle, with the sea murmuring against the cliffs below, and their unborn child moving between them, they began the slow, difficult, hopeful work of rebuilding what had been broken. The autumn passed gently at Kingsmere. September brought golden light and harvest festivals in the village below the castle. October painted the hills in shades of rust and amber. November brought the first frosts and the sharp, clean scent of winter on the wind. Julian and Arabella spent the months getting to know each other again. They walked together along the cliffs, talking about everything and nothing. They read together in the library, arguing about books and politics with a passion that reminded Julian of their earliest days. They ate meals together, not in the formal dining room but in a small parlor, where they could sit close and speak without servants hovering. And slowly, gradually, Arabella began to trust him again. It was not easy. There were moments when old fears surfaced, when some careless word or forgotten gesture would make her withdraw, her eyes clouding with the memory of betrayal. Julian learned to recognize these moments and to meet them with patience rather than frustration. He learned to listen rather than defend, to understand rather than dismiss. He was, for the first time in his life, learning to be a partner rather than a duke. The child was born in early December, on a night when snow fell thick and silent over the castle, and the sea was a distant roar muffled by the storm. Arabella's labor was long and difficult, and Julian spent the hours pacing the great hall like a caged animal, his prayers a tangled mixture of hope and fear, and desperate bargaining with whatever powers might be listening. When Mrs. McAllister finally appeared at the top of the stairs, her face tired but triumphant, Julian's heart nearly stopped. "Your Grace," she said, "you have a son, a healthy boy, with a fine pair of lungs on him, and Lady Arabella is asking for you." He took the stairs 2 at a time. Arabella was lying in the great bed of the master chamber, her dark hair spread across the pillows, her face pale and exhausted, but radiant with joy. In her arms, wrapped in a soft wool blanket, was a tiny bundle with a scrunched red face and a tuft of dark hair. "Julian," she whispered, "come meet your son." He approached the bed as though walking through a dream. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but the reality was beyond anything his imagination could have conjured. The baby, his son, was so small, so perfect, so utterly miraculous, that he felt tears spring to his eyes. "What shall we call him?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought perhaps William," Arabella said, "after your father, and James, after mine. William James Pembroke." "It is perfect." Julian reached out, his finger gently stroking the baby's impossibly soft cheek. "He is perfect." Arabella looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw something he had not seen in many months. Love, pure and uncomplicated, without the shadow of past hurts. "We made him together," she said, "before everything fell apart. He is proof that there was goodness between us, even when we could not see it." "There is still goodness between us," Julian said. "There is more than goodness. There is love. I have never stopped loving you, Arabella, not for a single moment." "I know." She shifted, making room for him on the bed. "I know that now. And I love you too. I think I always will." Julian sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his eyes fixed on the tiny life they had created. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the castle in white silence. Inside, a family was being born, fragile and new and full of hope. The road had been long and painful. There would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and fear, more work to be done before their marriage was fully healed. But they had made it through the worst. They had faced the darkness and found each other on the other side. And as the first pale light of dawn crept through the windows, Julian Pembroke, the Duke of Kingsmere, held his wife and his son in his arms, and knew that he was, for the first time in his life, truly home. 3 years later, on a bright June morning, the Duke and Duchess of Kingsmere stood on the terrace of their London townhouse, watching their son chase butterflies across the manicured lawn. William was sturdy and energetic, with his mother's dark curls and his father's grey eyes, and he had already mastered the art of wrapping every adult in his orbit around his small, imperious finger. "Another letter arrived this morning," Arabella said, her hand resting on the growing swell of her second pregnancy. "From your cousin." Julian's expression hardened. "Edwin?" "No. From Eleanor. But she mentioned that Edwin has been seen in Rome, living under an assumed name and working as a secretary to some minor Italian nobleman. It seems the continent has not been kind to him." "Good," Julian said, with no trace of sympathy. "He deserves far worse." "Perhaps, but I find I no longer care what becomes of him. Or of Catherine, for that matter. They are part of our past. They have no place in our future." Julian turned to look at his wife. and his expression softened. The years had been kind to her, or perhaps it was simply that happiness suited her. The shadows that had haunted her eyes in those dark months after their separation had faded, replaced by a quiet confidence that he found more beautiful than any physical feature. "I received a letter as well," he said. "From the Lord Chancellor's office. The petition to reverse the divorce has been granted. Legally, in every sense, you are my wife again." Arabella smiled, a slow, radiant smile that lit her whole face. "I was always your wife. A piece of paper never changed that." "No, but it matters nonetheless. It means that our children will never face questions about their legitimacy. It means that our names are linked together in the eyes of the law and the church. It means that I have the right to call you my Duchess without any asterisk or caveat." "You have always had that right. You simply forgot it for a time." Julian winced, but he did not look away. He had learned, in the years since their reconciliation, that facing his mistakes honestly was the only way to move past them. "I will never forget it again." Arabella reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers cool against his skin. "I know. You have spent 3 years proving it. You have been patient when I was distant, gentle when I was afraid, and steadfast when I doubted. You have been the husband I always believed you could be. And you," he said, "have been the wife I never deserved but cannot imagine living without." From the lawn below, William's delighted shriek rang out as he finally captured his butterfly. His parents turned to watch him, their hands finding each other without conscious thought, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "Julian," Arabella said quietly, "do you ever think about what might have happened if you had not come to Bath that day? If you had married Catherine and never learned the truth?" "Every day," he admitted. "It haunts me, the thought of losing you, of never knowing my son, of living a lie with a woman who destroyed our happiness for her own ambition. It is my private nightmare. And mine. But it did not happen. You did come to Bath. You did learn the truth. And we are here, together, with our son and another child on the way, and a future that stretches before us like a promise." Julian lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, just as he had done on the day he left her at Kingsmere Castle, 3 years before. But this time, he was not leaving. This time, he was staying. "I love you," he said. "I will love you until the cliffs of Kingsmere crumble into the sea." Arabella laughed, a sound of pure joy. "That is a very long time. It is not nearly long enough." And there, on the sunlit terrace of their London home, with their son laughing on the lawn and their second child growing beneath her heart, the Duke and Duchess of Kingsmere stood together and watched the future unfold, a future they had fought for, suffered for, and ultimately won. A future built not on pride or power or the expectations of society, but on the simple, extraordinary, unshakable foundation of love. If this story touched your heart, please leave a rose for Arabella in the comments below. A single rose to honor the quiet strength of a woman who refused to let betrayal break her. And if you believe that true love is worth fighting for, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of dukes, duchesses, and the love that defies them all.